Thank you, Andy, for bringing me to Knoxville, my home away from home. And like you said, I do know more about Knoxville than my own community of Hutchinson, Kansas, which is about 45,000 people. And in Kansas, that's considered a city. But my family members who are all from actual cities laugh at me when I say that. So you feel free to laugh too. But I do feel it my privilege to be part of the movement of God's Spirit here. I just feel like Knoxville is such a special place. The things that are happening here and the people who are here and the connections that God's Spirit is bringing about. And so it really is my privilege to be part of that. And one of those connections that God has brought about is the Knoxville Single Parent Roundtable. And I'm just curious, how many of you have participated in a roundtable meeting? And so, yeah, so those of you who haven't yet been to a meeting, you can ask somebody who has been in it. And I want to thank all the volunteers. Andy mentioned Nikki and Sheila, and also Angela and Kathy for setting up. And I want to thank you for being here, for taking time out of your busy lives. I know, I can just guess that each one of you in this room is already doing about 4 or 5 things in the church, and because you care. And you're here because you care. And so you're here thinking about adding something else to what you're already doing, is my guess. And so I want to say thank you for hearing God's Spirit bring us together tonight. And I also want to thank my husband, who is alone, home alone, being a single dad to my 2 youngest children at home. He wanted to go to a basketball game tonight, and my 2 kids don't want to go, so he's going to have to figure out some way to bribe them. So they're probably eating pizza somewhere. I don't know. Well, let me tell you just a little bit about myself before we get started. And like Andy said, this single parent ministry has really hit a sweet spot for me. Although I didn't start out with a passion about single parent families. I started out with a passion about poverty. Poverty and community development was my primary area of research and expertise in college and in seminary. And that led me, inevitably, to single-parent families because the two go hand in hand in so many cases. And I discovered that at the bottom, if you scratch the surface of many, I won't say most, but many, if not most, stories of poverty in our country, not around the world, but at least in most of our communities, there is a broken family somewhere in the picture. It may be a single-parent family. It may be a seemingly intact family that is torn by abuse. It may be abandonment. It may be addictions. But at the root of so many of our social problems, the outward expression, the inward root is family brokenness. And so what I am excited about is that this is an issue that the church can really wrap its arms around. There are lots of things that we struggle to know what to do about. And make no mistakes, this is a big, complex issue, and it doesn't have easy solutions, but it is something that we as the body of Christ can do something constructive about that makes a difference not just for today, but for the next generation and the next and for the whole community. So each of you in this room and your congregations are seeds of the oaks of righteousness, as Isaiah 61 talks about, that God is planting to bring wholeness and shalom in a community. Well, let me tell you about some of the things I'm engaged in my own community, just as a way of kind of bridging into this. So my husband is a pastor at Faith Mennonite Church, and when I told the church what I was going to be doing this weekend, we bring 2 girls to church with us, and so when I talked about ministry with single-parent families, little Michaela piped up and said, "Yeah, like mine," because her mom is a single parent. And we've sort of, this has been our family. My daughter's about the same age as Michaela, and we've sort of adopted them. And they have become very special to our family, and I have seen an amazing transformation in their lives as their mom, who has gone from drug addiction and an abusive relationship, found Christ, life completely turned around. She is now in college. She is now clean and sober for almost 2 years. She is a good, responsible parent, and her kids are still struggling in some areas, but she has a special needs daughter that she takes phenomenal care of. And so if I ever sort of lose faith or lose hope that Jesus can make a difference, I just look at Michaela and her family. Another thing my family is involved with is a ministry called Circles of Hope, and you have something similar here in Knoxville. Is with formerly homeless population. In Hutchinson, we are doing this. It's extension of Bridges Out of Poverty training, which some of you may have heard about, and it is bringing mentors or allies together with a family trying to leave poverty and walking with them. And a number of the families, not all, but a number of the families are single-parent families, and so one of the sons of a single mom on Thursday night when we get together was telling me that they're probably going to have, he and his mom are probably going to have to move because his stepfather was starting to get abusive again. And so that caused a lot of grief for me because this family has been important to us. And then also on Thursday, got a call from another mom who's part of a ministry that called the Garden Ministry, which is, we call it our playground church because it's with low-income kids, and we often meet in a playground, and we've gotten to know their families and ministered to them, and a lot of those are single-parent families. And one of the moms called me and said, "Do you think your husband could get together with my son?" And well, probably not this weekend. I'm going away. What's up? He said, "Well, he might be being expelled for school because they found drug paraphernalia in his locker. And he really just needs to talk to a man right now." And so my husband went out to lunch with him yesterday. I like to brag on my husband because he really is making the difference in the lives of some of these boys. So in all of these different ways that kind of bring us into relationship with single parents, seeing Jesus make a difference, seeing the heartache and seeing the strengths of these moms and sometimes dads who do anything for their kids. And when I got started on this, I used to think, single parents is something, it's something that I look at, something that I study. And then I had to sit back and realize, wait a minute. My parents divorced when I was 5, and I lived with my mom, just me and my mom, for about 1.5 years before she remarried. So I was the child of a single parent. And honestly, that had never connected with me until after I got into this and started looking at it. So I have a personal connection with it as well. So from small stories, we're going to tell a lot of stories this weekend because that's how we see God at work, and that's what keeps us going. But we're also going to be looking at the big picture. And so our goal for this particular session is to get the big picture of what could be done in Knoxville to make a difference for families and to explore possibilities for productive partnerships. So as you're looking at your books and go on the first page, I just want you to know as you kind of skip past the welcome page, if you want to know why the motif for our training is a stork, read the welcome page and you'll find out. All right, so vision. Big picture is rooted in vision. What is our vision? We're here because we know that things are not what they're supposed to be, and there is within us a vision of what we want to see, a God-hearted vision of what Knoxville, what our churches, what single-parent families should look like. So for example, for me, how I would finish the sentence for my community is, in my vision for single-parent families in Hutchinson, Kansas, every child knows that they have a connection with a caring adult who's available for them when they need them as a guiding, available relationship. So I want to just invite you, take a minute, and you can pick just one of those lines, single parents and children, church, community, and finish the sentence. How would you say, this is my vision for single-parent families in Knoxville? Go ahead and write that down. Everybody is going to have their own unique vision, and that's a good thing because it takes everybody's little bit of the prism to put together to make the whole big, beautiful picture of what God is doing. What I want to lay out in this session is a fourfold strategic model if we were fully engaged as churches, as a community, in supporting and empowering single-parent families toward this vision, what would that look like? What would be happening? And so, four areas that we want to highlight. First of all, churches would be embracing families. Any family that wanted a spiritual home, that wanted to know about Jesus, that wanted to live in community, fellowship with other Christians, would find a welcoming home in a church. And churches would walk with families through the ups and downs of single-parent life. So that's the first big area. And that's going to be the main focus of our training this weekend. Second big picture area is that there would be programs at churches, nonprofits, city agencies, programs that empower families to thrive. Single-parent families need specific services. They need connections. They need facilitated opportunities. So programs, first we're talking about churches embracing families, which is more relational, organic. We also need organized programs. Thirdly, collaborations that maximize impact, because no church or nonprofit is an island, and we do more together than we can do individually. So churches and nonprofits and city agencies are working together to maximize their impact. And then fourthly, the community as a whole has a commitment to strengthening families, because it's not just enough, the saying, it's not you want an ambulance at the bottom or you want a guardrail at the top of the cliff. We need to start putting guardrails at the top of the cliff so that families don't fall off, and that we're helping to create a community climate where families are supported, where marriages are strong, and where families that are broken have the maximum opportunity in the community through employment, transportation, childcare, to better their lives. So those are the four areas. Any questions about this big picture? And this will be broken down in more detail. We're going to focus, like I said, on the, and by the way, I just want to mention in your handout, it does go into more detail about each of these areas and about the vision, so I encourage you to take that home and read through it. So we're going to focus on this first strategic area. Churches are embracing families. And three dynamics to that churches are, first of all, welcoming families. So any single parent family that walks through the doors of a church is going to find a warm welcome. And there's a hospitable climate for single parent families. Secondly, they're going to connect families with one another, in relationships with other church members, connect them with resources so that they become an integral part of the life of the church. And that thirdly, churches are engaging families as kingdom assets, because it's not just enough to welcome them and say, okay, we're going to fix you, we're going to restore you, so you can go off and have a nice life. No, that's not what the Christian life is about. We need to recognize that God has placed within each family, within each individual, gifts that God has designed for this strengthening, the uplift, building up the church and the community. And so the church's job is to release those gifts in single-parent families. And tomorrow is when we're going to really unpack this and talk about how we do this in the church. The second main area about ministry programs that empower single-parent families to thrive. We're classifying these programs in three areas: renewal, resources, and relationships. So ministries of renewal have to do with restoring families that are in crisis or at risk. So this would be divorce recovery groups, grief groups for families that have lost a parent, counseling, spiritual healing prayer. So kind of helping people get put back together with God's help, and helping families make past a threshold of barely surviving. Okay? And resources has to do with those tangible and intangible supports for families to be financially independent and to be healthy. So tangible resources such as childcare, such as transportation, knowledge and skill resources such as how do you budget, job training, and these, of course, can be through nonprofits as well as through churches, which is why we are putting the emphasis tonight on the connections between churches and nonprofits, because no church could do all this stuff on their own, and no nonprofit could do all this stuff on their own, and it's in the connections between them that the fruitful ministry happens. And then thirdly, relationships. And that is fostering healthy relationships within the family system, so parenting, preparing couples for remarriage, talking about blended families, talking about how do you set up a productive relationship with your ex so that the kids aren't getting hurt by this. But then also relationships within the body of Christ, so mentoring, fellowship groups, Bible study groups. And I put discipling under relationships because I don't believe that real discipleship happens outside of relationship. So, you've got programs of renewal where somebody's coming to Christ and they're getting healed, but then that long walk of discipleship happens through relationships. Any question? Yeah.
So the churches that you've seen with programs or starting programs, do they typically try to focus on one of these areas?
Great question.
Because they can't do it all.
Right. Yes and no. Yes, I think that you do have to find your focus. But also you recognize that all these things are intertwined, because the people that come to your church for resources are maybe in the middle of crisis, and so they need to be directed to renewal. Or you may discover that the reason that they are not able to sustain themselves financially is because of a breakdown in relationships, So then there has to be a connection between these, but while at the same time, within a program, there is need to structure some focus. And again, that's where our need for connectivity comes in, because you can't do everything, but you can connect people to everything. Any other questions about this? And again, these are kind of arbitrary divisions, and there's sort of a fuzzy gray area between where renewal stops and, relationships start. But the point is that we're thinking about what do families need. And the reason why this is helpful is because if your church is just focused on renewal, then you might be getting people past the initial stages of grief counseling or post-divorce recovery. But then after that 6-week program is over, they'll sort of fall off the cliff, they'll fall off the map, unless you're thinking ahead about relationships. Or you could be trying to, create mentoring relationships and other kinds of things, but then in fellowship groups, but then those fellowship groups keep running up against the kind of practical needs that people have that are keeping them from making advances. So, and again, these are things that, now we'll talk about more. This is just a kind of a broad overview. So the third area of our model was collaborations. And here again, we break it down into 3 parts. Networks, which the Knoxville Single Parent Roundtable is an example. And a network is kind of a loose association of people and organizations that have a common cause or a common vision that come together regularly for sharing information and prayer and telling each other what's happening and how do you get resources. But they're not necessarily, and they might sponsor a joint project, but they're not necessarily doing anything together. It's mainly for support and information. Partnership is focused on, here's a task that your organization and my organization have committed to do together. I'm going to support you in some way with volunteers, or we're going to plan this event together. And then a coalition is more of a broad community or citywide initiative that brings different sectors of the community together to tackle a big problem, like a marriage strengthening initiative, or Annie's talking about a trafficking initiative starting up, anti-trafficking. And then strengthening the future families, again, 3 parts. Don't you I just love this, 3. You can tell I'm the spouse of a preacher. 3 points to everything. The community strengthens the future of families by preventing, where it can, family brokenness. And let me just give you one example. When an unmarried mother, at the time when she gives birth, 80% of those unmarried mothers are in some kind of relationship with the father, whether they're cohabiting or living apart. And 97% of those unmarried moms say they want the dad in the picture. And the vast majority of dads are, in fact, in the picture at the time of the child's birth, on the birth certificate, giving informal support, seeing the child, even if they don't live in the home. Among couples that are not married, 5 years later, only 35% are still together. The time to do that intervention in a family is right when the child is born, because that's when that bonding is taking place. So if you're waiting until the child's in preschool, the chances are the dad has already dropped out of the picture. So how do you've got a chance, a golden moment when the child is born, to bond mother and father together and help them give the child a healthy start. And that will prevent a single-parent family in the future. Advocacy for families, and this is supporting single-parent families through case advocacy, being a presence for them in the courts, in the schools, in discussing issues of public policy. Where's the voice of single-parent families in that? And then thirdly, culture shift. And that is the church's voice in shaping a culture that values marriage, that honors marriage, and that is respectful to parents, whether married or not, supports parents in parenting. Okay, so that's our model in a nutshell. This is the big picture of what we can do together. In this model, if you're feeling tired and overwhelmed because this is so big, though that's the point. This is to do this kind of work, it's going to take the whole body of Christ coming together, in which each organization, church, nonprofit, has its own distinct calling, has its own distinct role, but working together. Like, for example, I usually cook, my husband does the dishes. I hate doing the dishes, he hates cooking, but together between the two of us, we keep the household fed. So, each organization does its thing, but it does it in its part of a whole. And that makes all the difference. Because if your church just goes and does its thing without seeing itself connected to this big picture, you're still going to do good. But you're losing out on the opportunity to multiply your efforts through connectivity. And another point I want to make about this model is that ministry has seasons, that there's a time for everything. And so for some churches, they're in a startup phase. Some churches, they're in a real focus phase. Our focus is the children of single mothers, and that's what we're going to focus on. Other churches may be in a smorgasbord stage. We're going to try a bunch of stuff and see what sticks. So there's no really one way you fit into this, because it depends on where your church is in its life, and in your discernment of God's Spirit's calling on you together. And then the emphasis on seeing how ministries can fit together. Hey, I'm doing this, you're doing that. How do we plug it in so that we're not replicating and we're also not leaving gaps? So, like I said, the focus for this training weekend is the first set of goals. Our goal for this weekend is that every church represented here learns how to welcome single parents that walk through the doors, or maybe have walked through the doors in the past, then walked back out because they didn't perceive that this was a welcoming place for them to be. And to bring those families, single-parent families that may just be on the fringes of church life, maybe just coming once in a while but not really feeling like they fit in. How do you take those families and make them an integral, valued, contributing part of your church's life? How are you taking families that have needs, connecting them with the resources of the church and of the broader community? How do you take families parents that have gifts and strength and a desire to serve, and connect them in a constructive way with the ministry of the church. So that's what we're going to be talking about. And then also, we are going to be encouraging and preparing churches to take steps towards these other goals. So we're going to be talking in the next training session in April about programs and the different kinds of ways that churches can work together with nonprofits or set up programs within them, either partner or develop a program to empower families to thrive. And some people may be wondering, well, when I think about single-parent family ministry, I'm thinking about a Bible study. I'm thinking about a support group, or I'm thinking about a child care ministry. That's kind of the image that pops into our minds. And those things are important. We're not de-emphasizing programs by putting them second. What we're saying by putting the emphasis on welcoming, that first strategic goal, is we're saying that you lose a lot if you have a program that serves single-parent families but doesn't draw them into the life of the church. If you have a program that serves a family, they're served for a day. If you draw them into the life of the church, then it's not only impacting them in that interaction, but it's for the rest of their lives and potentially their children's lives and their children's children. And we'll be talking more about the difference that makes being part of a welcoming church fellowship. But we're saying that having the church as the bedrock of programs is far more fruitful than starting with a program. At the very least, you won't be driving families away from the church through an unknowingly insensitive thing that was said or done. So where do you fit into this big picture? All of us are coming here tonight with experiences, with programs under our belt, or volunteer experience, or passions that you have. So thinking about, all right, so we have these 4 big picture areas. Where do you fit into this picture right now? You're here because you want to learn to do something or to improve a ministry you already have. So what are your future goals and how do they fit in? And how do you connect with others to maximize your impact? Andy is going to be passing out some sticky notes. And I'm going to encourage you to because this picture is so big, we're going to focus on just 4 things right now. And everybody's going to get a couple orange sheets and a couple blue sheets. And on your sticky note, I want you on the orange, because this is Knoxville, so had to get something orange, right? I've learned that. So go ahead and pass them out, yeah. So on your orange sticky note, write one per ministry, write a current activity you are doing that fits into one of these 4 areas. Welcoming single-parent families into the church, ministries of renewal, that is helping families and parents in crisis, resources, that's providing tangible resources or skills to help families be independent and thrive, and then relationships, connecting families with each other, with mentors, with Bible study, discipleship opportunities. So on the orange, and also pass out the blue, because on the blue, for blue sky thinking, what is one of your future goals? So write down at least one current activity. Thanks, Andy. Sorry, didn't warn you about that one. To keep you on your toes. So on the orange sticky, a current activity of your church or nonprofit that fits into one of these 4 areas. And on the blue, a future goal that you have that fits into one of these 4 areas.